This is a brief history of the language of the Sri Lanka Malays, and the question asked is it in peril of extinction? Ini pelajaran adalah atas bahasa Melayu di Sri Lanka. Apa cara itu jadi? Kenapa itu jadi? Kapan ini menjadi? Dan di mana bahasa ini lahir? It is sad indeed that this very unique language is fast fading into the sunset with just a handful of folks trying to desperately keep fanning this dying ember to keep it alive for posterity. To get a real understanding of this unique language, one will have to trace the history of how, why, when, and where the language emerged. Let's go back into the history of the Sri Lankan Malays and get a better understanding of the emergence of this unique language of theirs. We have to go back in time during the initial Dutch occupation of the East Indies Archipelago, which they named Netherlands or Dutch East Indies, which is presently called Indonesia, in their quest for the lucrative spice trade and spice route. The first arrival of the archipelago was the Dutch trading company called Dutch VOC, Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie, under the mandate of the Dutch government in the late 18th century, to be subsequently taken over wholly by the Dutch government at the beginning of the 19th century. At the inception, the Dutch controlled a major portion of the whole archipelago and eventually controlled the whole of the archipelago, having evicted the British, French, and Portuguese colonial powers who had a toehold on small enclosed areas or enclaves in regions of Sumatra, Java, with the whole of the Maluku chain of islands, including Ambon on the south of the Maluku Islands, which are held by the Portuguese, as it was a very prized possession because of the excellent spices that were produced in those islands. But subsequently, the Dutch took over from all these colonial powers. The archipelago itself consists of 17,500 islands, of which 6,000 are inhabited in an area of 741,100 square miles, and stretches 2,300 miles from east to west. The important things to note here is there are 250 to 300 distinct cultural or ethnic groups and as many as 700 languages and dialects within this archipelago. The main ethnic groups of the Indonesian archipelago are in Sumatra with Achinese ethnic group, Minangkabau, another ethnic group, and in Java, the Betawi, Cirebonese, Javanese, Madurasi, and Sundanese ethnic groups. In Kalimantan, the Banjaris, Dayak, and in Sulawesi, Boginese, Toraja. In Papua, they are Melanesian, Papuan, and in the Lesser Sunda Islands, Balinese, Mangkarai, Sumba, Sumbawa, and the Balinese, Malakans, and Ambonese. If you refer to the map, you can see how it stretches right across in the Indian Ocean, with Sumatra on the western end, Java in the center, and there is Bali at one end, which is called Denpasar here, which is the airport at Bali, and Kalimantan is north, Sulawesi, and the Maluku Islands, with Ambon at the southernmost tip. And then we go on to Papua, or they call it Irian Jaya now. Let's get to the creation of the Bahasa Campuran, mixed Malay language, that our ancestors brought along with them when they came to Sri Lanka with the Dutch. In around the year 1619, the existing city of Jayakarta was razed to the ground and a new city built with the name changed to Batavia, which is the present-day Jakarta. Batavia also means Holland in the Dutch language. Batavia was the Dutch administration's main and major point of trade, as well as for international trade. In addition to having all administrative officers that catered to the requirements of the archipelago, it was really a center hub for the whole archipelago. Because of that, the many peoples of the archipelago and the many ethnic groups convert to the great city in great numbers for various purposes, especially for trade. As is the normal trait of humans, they created their own compounds of villages in and around the city and remained confined to their villages, but they were later to find that there are problems of communication because it became a major issue. And this led to the creation of our ancestors' Bahasa Campuran, meaning mixed language. As we all know, language is one of the most effective ways of communication that is evolved within and among the distinctive communities, but not necessarily confined to its own. Necessity is the mother of invention, is what they say, and soon we have the integration of words from other dialects that creep into one's own language, thus making communications more effective to the needs of the populace. A good example of this is the Bahasa Campuran that emerged from that of the peoples of the archipelago, with 250 to 300 distinct cultural groups and as many as 700 languages and dialects, living within a span of 3,700 kilometers and occupying 6,000 islands of its 17,500 islands. The Bahasa Campuran add, in addition to a mix of the various indigenous languages of the archipelago, that's the languages of all the ethnic groups in the archipelago, many words of Sanskrit origin which crept in when the Indians invaded the country long before the Dutch. And Portuguese when the Maluku Islands were under the control of the Portuguese, and the Dutch while they were under British rule, being absorbed into the Bahasa Campuran. There was also a sprinkling of Hindi due to occupancy of an enclave in Sumatra and the presence of Indian Bengali sepoys serving the British, and of course some English words too. In fact, the Bahasa Campuran was a unique language as it contained words from the very own dialects of the people of the archipelago and the addition of words from other alien languages in order to make communication easier in the day-to-day affairs of the people. It was indeed a creation of a new language dating back to the very early 1600s. Please make a note of this. A language that created long before the modern day Malay languages. The Sri Lankan Malay should be proud of this fact and proud of their ancestry. So on arrival in Sri Lanka, or Ceylon as it was called at that time, they carried on the trend of making communications easier by adding words of Sinhalese and Tamil origin to supplement their vocabulary for ease of communication with the local populace. The language they brought along with them was written in the Jawi script, which is the Arabic script sans the accentuating marks or diacritical marks. Very unfortunately, the writing aspect of the language, that is the Jawi script, faded away by non-use and neglect, and the Malays were left with only a spoken language, much to the detriment of the language. For the language was then passed on from generation to generation by word of mouth, and further deterioration ensued. Very fortunately, in the 17th century, the Malay world started adopting the Romanized script, the Universal English script, and we may now be able to salvage our Bahasa Campuran from any further deterioration. But getting back the status quo is going to be an uphill task. For the purposes of better communications has led to the erosion of our Bahasa Campuran through the ages, and now the Malays appear to be content with replacing their own Bahasa Campuran words with the borrowed words from other languages. So in this pristine Bahasa Campuran, the ancient language of the Malays will cease to exist, is a great fear. While accepting the fact that our Bahasa Campuran has no real economic value in the land of their adoption, you cannot hide the fact that it is a rich and very old language that has to be perpetuated and kept alive for posterity. It was a Malayan Prime Minister who once said and insulted the Malays in Sri Lanka when he said, "They don't look like Malays, they do not act as Malays, and they do not speak the Malay language." Perhaps the comment was made as it is a known fact that the vast majority of the Sri Lankan Malays are of Indonesian origin, with the Dutch categorizing them as Javanese, which led to the local folks calling them Jaminisu in Sinhalese and Jamanidan in Tamil, meaning people from Java. Under the British, they were recategorized, and they did so for all these Javanese troops that they absorbed into the army and called them Malays, because the British arrived in Sri Lanka from Malaya with just a few of the Malay soldiers they could muster, hence necessitating the absorption of the Javanese troop that arrived with the Dutch. Due to the classification by the Dutch and English as stated below, many of the Malays in Sri Lanka may never know their ethnic backgrounds. However, it is possible that they may be able to get an inkling of this from their physical features, gait, and behavioral attitudes. Albeit our ancestors on the whole were an artistic, fun-loving, happy-go-lucky type of people, but lived within the spiritual and morality dictates of their religious faiths. They even brought their own brand of renowned culinary expertise, with the present generation called by alien names other than their own. And of course their distinctive clothes, which are now being surreptitiously replaced by Arab-influenced apparels clothes. So one can only guess that the Malays will someday in the future blend with the rest of the incumbent indigenous groups of the land of the adoption, unless a conscientious effort is made by them to stop this trend of a disappearing tribe. It will indeed be very sad and heart-wrenching to see the demise of the proud Sri Lankan Malay race. Presently, the topic of Bahasa Campuran remains as the domain of the scholars, linguists, researchers, and authors/writers who delved and reveled into what they called was an endangered language. But to help overcome this debacle saw no apparent assistance or meaningful solution except for, which I guess, personal enrichment and educational accolades. In conclusion, one prays that the Malay community will rally and rise to the occasion and do our ancestors proud by reviving our language, including our traditions and customs and rich culture, to our old days of glory. Because it is said that if you do not know your mother tongue, how can you call yourself a Malay? The Malaysian PM was right when he said the Malay, since Sri Lanka did not speak Malay. The task of the revival of the language is a gargantuan one, a huge and humongous one indeed, and needs the wholehearted support of the Malay community and the uninterested support to the few volunteers who are striving very hard to make the revival bear fruition. Thank you for listening, and God bless you all. Bye.